This is another edition of Nerdy by Nature. I'm one of your hosts, Agent Smith, aka Tyler.
And I'm Charlie, aka Captain Roger.
And as we promised on our last episode, we of course reviewed the graphic novel The Killing Joke by graphic novelist Alan Moore, and mentioned that we'd be going over Joker, the #1 movie right now in the country. Had a big weekend at the box office, and it's a very watchable film. We highly recommend it for sure, and we are going to do a full review of the movie. So of course, as always, spoiler alert, we're going to be going over, not scene by scene, but hitting the highlights, talking about theories, fan thoughts, some of the controversy that's gone down in the film, and much more. So if you have not seen the film, you'll want to be sure to fast forward through this episode or go back and listen to some other episodes. But with that being said, Charlie, let's go ahead and jump right into Joker, the movie. I thought it was beautifully produced by the director Todd Phillips. The scenes were so vivid, and even when there were dark scenes, I thought they really did a good job of using natural light, and it was just beautifully produced from start to finish.
Oh, definitely. And yeah, Todd Phillips, probably best known for directing the Hangover movies, and that's just kind of funny that he went into this movie. I know that was a lot of people's concern, or one of their concerns about this movie when it was coming out, was that he had only done comedy. But honestly, comedy and drama, like even the actors, you know, they really intertwine pretty well or make that transition from comedy to serious drama. You've seen that with, you know, the different actors like Jim Carrey and Robin Williams did the same thing. It's strange, but they go from comedy to drama really well, and I enjoyed the movie. It took a while for me to get on board, I guess, more or less, because I mean, I enjoyed the movie when we went to see it, but at the same time, I came out of it not sure whether I enjoyed it or not, and just after thinking about it for a while, it's grown on me, and I haven't really been able to think about anything else.
Right, and it's a film that definitely grabs your attention right off the bat and jars you at certain moments throughout the film. And it's, even for the Joker, it's a dark film, it's a dark take, which makes sense given that it's part of the DC Dark or DC Black label. So right. I guess that's to be expected. But you're right, when you leave the theater, you're just kind of like, whew. Like we both had joked after the movie screening, we said, man, we're going to have to go home and watch something a little more positive, a little more upbeat before we go to bed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gets heavy.
Yeah, it definitely does. And if you're somebody that felt like DC went too dark with anything, then this doesn't really go the other way. It's a lot darker than probably any of their other movies.
And of course, I think it's really neat the way that they began the film. Joaquin Phoenix does a beautiful job of playing Arthur Fleck and the Joker. I mean, just really outdid himself in this one. I think he took his time, did his homework, did his research, and unlike maybe some other Joker portrayals, he made it his own, in a sense. Much in the way that you would see someone like Jack Nicholson do the character, or that we got to see with Heath Ledger. They really just made it a staple character, and they made it their own version. So I think Phoenix did that to a T in this one. And so it begins with him sort of at his office, or where he works every day per se. He's sitting applying his makeup as a clown, and you see some other co-workers in the background, and you get a really neat scene where it zooms in into his face, and you see him quote unquote putting on a happy face.
Right.
But then you get that one little teardrop that just kind of rolls down his cheek. So you realize that things maybe aren't quite right, or this is somebody that might be dealing with some kind of social issue or struggling.
Oh yeah, you can definitely tell that there's something going on with this guy. But it's funny because I read an article where they were interviewing Joaquin Phoenix about playing the Joker, and it seems to be a thing that everybody that takes that role talks to like the previous actors that have played that role, and the role has always had some kind of emotional effect on the actor. And so they asked him if it had any kind of effect on him, and he said no. And I get a feeling that there's a reason for that, and that it didn't really feel like a comic book movie at all. It almost didn't really feel like the Joker. Yes, he took the name Joker, and there were references to Gotham and all of that, but Joaquin Phoenix has always been an actor that didn't really want to do comic book movies, and hasn't up until now, and I almost want to say that's probably because you could easily say that this wasn't a comic book movie. If they took out the few references of Gotham and, didn't call him Joker, then it could be very easy to say that this was just a drama about a mentally ill person.
Right, more like a psychological thriller and less of a villain/DC comic film.
Right.
And so from there, we get a view of his day job where he is pretending to be a clown out on the streets. He's a sign holder, more or less.
Right.
And we've all seen that guy that's trying to promote something for a business, or hey, 10% off this new phone plan, come in today. And in this case, it happens to be a going out of business sale for a local company.
Right.
So he's sort of like a clown for hire, I guess, or a promotional guy for hire. And he's trying to enjoy his job and tell people like, hey, the company's going out of business. Come get these great deals. And we get a close-up shot of these little teens running through the streets of Gotham, just being typical teens, kind of punkish, haha, catch me if you can. And they see this goofy clown. They start to verbally make fun of him, end up stealing his sign, running
Right.
off with it. Typical, teen thing to do. We've all been young before, wanted to pull a prank. Well, that's the way that this particular character, Arthur Fleck, makes his money, and he realizes, oh crap, they've stolen my sign.
Right.
I need to go get that back. And you see him run away like, hey, bring that back. And so he
Right.
follows them into a back alley, and they proceed to take it to the next level. And I don't want to say mug him per se, because they're just teens, they're not looking for money, but they beat him up pretty good.
Right, and it even goes later on into the movie where he's talking to his boss, and his boss is asking him where the sign is, like he would steal the sign, like why?
Right, kind of
he
accusatory.
Right,
Yeah.
and he even mentions, he's like, why would I steal the sign? I have no need for a going out of business sign, because the boss almost acts like he's got it at home, hidden away
Well,
or something.
He more or less doesn't believe him. He's like, oh, so a couple of teens beat you up in a back alley?
Right.
Like, you let that happen?
And I don't really know why that's so unbelievable.
I
didn't
guess
get
for his
that,
boss,
but-
it's kind of like a grown man thing. Like, really? You let a bunch of kids steal a
Oh,
sign
yeah, I
and,
guess.
and steal it away? Like, I'm not buying that. Like, you're just a weird dude. Everybody here in the office has made complaints.
True.
This is your last straw. But, that's an important thing to bring up, I think. The sign stealing, pardon me. And the kids, beating him up and him laying there just distraught. Like, gosh, all I'm trying to do is make ends meet and, work this job and make people happy. Like, in a weird sort of way, you feel very much so sympathetic for Arthur Fleck in the very beginning of this film. And that struck me as kind of weird and almost made me a little uncomfortable, admittedly so, because given who this is and we all know who he becomes, it's like, hold up, wait a minute, no, like, I'm not supposed to feel sympathy for the Joker. Like, this guy is a maniac. He's crazy. He has no rules. He's unpredictable. He's a wild card. Like, no.
Right, and I think that was by design, really, a testament to Phoenix's acting, because, I felt sorry for him and felt sympathy for him pretty much all the way up until the first group of people that he murdered.
Right, and you do. You feel for him. You start to think, well, maybe this is just a guy that's down on his luck. Yeah, he's deemed as quote-unquote crazier out there, but maybe if he has the right help or if he seats the right person, maybe he can turn things around.
Right.
And, things will start to look up. But obviously, of course, they don't in this film. It just gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do. You feel very much sympathetic for the character, and I think you're right that was by design by Todd Phillips. And I will say that I think it brings to light on a positive note at least it's a conversation starter for people to recognize mental illness for what it is,
right?
And to have that conversation with somebody, or if you know somebody that's struggling through that, it's hard to deal with. There are a multitude of forms of mental illness. It comes in all shapes and forms and sizes.
Right.
So I hope that the positive takeaway from this film is that people start to recognize it more and maybe either put more funding into it or find new ways to approach it.
Right.
Because I think it is an issue that is definitely towards the top of the list now from a societal standpoint. So that's a good thing. But from there, we start to see him have this relationship with his mom as a caretaker. We see that, again, kind of feel that sympathy. It's like, oh man, this is somebody that maybe could have been something, but he's stuck at home with his mom being her caretaker.
Right.
And we also start to kind of see where he gets a little bit of his craziness from, because she frankly doesn't quite seem to be all the way there. Penny Fleck, played by Frances Conroy, it's like, she seems a little off kilter, and maybe that's why he needs to take care of her. She's not quite capable of normal functionality in society. It seems like.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about that it doesn't ever let up, it just gets darker and darker. That to me was kind of a problem with the movie. Like, I guess when we got done and came out of the movie, I was emotionally drained, and it just because normally when you see a movie about somebody that has problems or a villain or something, you normally see a counterpart to that, some kind of good somewhere. And it just, to me, it didn't feel like there was ever a let up on any of it. It didn't ever, like, there was no good guy. And like, even the people that you could think should be good or would be good, they were even portrayed as not so great people.
Right. I think a perfect example of that was Brett Cullen's character, who played Thomas Wayne.
Right.
Somebody that historically we've seen as this beacon of light for Gotham, and of course in most moments he is.
Right.
But I think we also get to see a little bit different view or take on Thomas Wayne, because in some of the articles that I read before we did this particular episode, they brought up great points. They're like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, Thomas Wayne's still a businessman.
Right.
So, sometimes business people, they have to be cutthroat, or the reason that some people are in those, top roles is because they have that ability to flip that switch and be, I don't want to say cutthroat, but to make those tough decisions, or say, hey, look, get out of my face here, we're doing business.
Right.
I don't have time for this. But I will also mention, as far as a critique or criticism that kind of bothered me a little bit, was the fact that they chose Brett Cullen to play Thomas Wayne.
Right.
Because I'm sure a lot of you watching the film as well did the same thing that we did, and we realized, wait a minute, isn't that the guy that plays the Congressman in The Dark Knight Rises? And if you were thinking that, you're 100% correct. That's exactly who that is. It's the same guy. And I get that this is a completely different movie, and you can't connect those two worlds, but we had talked about this before the episode. It's kind of hard not to make that connection.
Yeah, even if it's not part of that universe or that world, you're still mentally going to see that and make those connections in your mind, whether they want you to or not. And just think that's a problem with actors sometimes, honestly. But I would have rather them get somebody else. But, like you were saying, he's a businessman, but the Waynes have always been portrayed as like a philanthropic group of, or, family that donates money to Gotham City and wants it to be better. And he was just kind of portrayed like a rude, not so great person that might have cheated on his wife at some point, and it just didn't sit right with me.
No, and I'd say probably for his particular character background, from a comic book standpoint, it didn't sit right with a lot of people. But I want to go back to your initial point about it getting kind of darker and there not being really any kind of light moments or positive moments. I think that was also by design. I think if you think about the Joker's character and his overall arc, his view or his outlook on reality or on life in general is that it's all just a bad joke.
Definitely.
And so I think we get to see that transition through the film where all of these bad things just keep piling up and just keep happening. Right. And he just kind of, towards the end, has this epiphany of, you know what, it's all just a big joke, and I'm going to go ahead and just keep bringing the punchlines.
Right,
and
yeah. He
more or less roll with the punches.
And goes all out. And, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It was a good character study and a good movie overall. But it just, I don't know, it just made it so draining, and on me at least, that my feelings is I generally like to see that lighter side to counteract the bad somewhere.
Right, but I think you're right, though. It can emotionally exhaust you. So, it's one that's, it's 2 hours long, so make sure you have the time to watch it.
Right.
But also, I think you need to be in the right mindset to go and see it and appreciate it. And I think we would definitely agree that it's a film that you want to watch twice, because for me, I'll admit, I'd love to go see it again, and I will. When I watched it the first time through, I missed, because there are some socially charged and some politically charged scenes, I think, for sure in this one, that has led to some controversy, if you want to use that term.
Right.
And we'll get into that in just a minute. But for me, watching it the first time through, I focused mainly on Joaquin Phoenix, and I went into it thinking, all right, you've got 2 hours, convince me. Like, show me what you're going to do to make this Joker character your own, much in the way that Heath Ledger did, and Jack Nicholson, and Mark Hamill, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And he did. He convinced me within that 2 hour window. I solely focused on his performance. I paid attention to the background and other things that were working in the subplot, things like that. But my primary focus was on Phoenix to see, okay, how is he going to make this his own? And he does a beautiful job.
Oh, yeah, he does. And I really had no doubt that he would. He's an incredible actor, and he's only gotten better as the years go by. But going back to what you were saying, that you want to see it a second time, I definitely want to see it a second time as well, just because most of the time you don't notice everything the first time you go through a movie. But I will say this is not necessarily necessarily a movie that I would probably just turn on at, at the drop of a hat, just because it is so emotionally draining. I mean, I just, like, it's a good movie, but it's not one of those movies that I see myself seeing, like, over and over and over and over again. Wasn't really a quotable movie, you know, so that's just me, but...
Oh, and I think I would agree with that, because it's one that you, like I said, you have to be in the right mindset to watch it.
Right.
And this is, of course, an unfair comparison, probably apples to oranges, but to your point, take The Dark Knight, for example. That's one that, I would watch any given week and just thoroughly enjoy, right? And it's still a movie that can have scenes where you're like, whew, that was uncomfortable, or like, that terrified me. And that's a testament to Heath Ledger's performance,
Definitely.
But, yeah, with this one, with Joaquin Phoenix, it's one that, like I said before, at the top of the episode, it'll jar you, and if you're not ready for it, and it's just one that you be prepared, I guess is what we're trying to say when if you go into this film. Of course, if you're listening to this and you've already watched it, you're like, yep, no, that checks out. I was emotionally drained as well. But to go back to talking about, of course, Phoenix's job as the Joker, and such a beautiful job that he does, a scene where I thought that he really brought that home, and it was just a beautiful scene all the way around from his acting, and then also the way that the scene was shot by Todd Phillips and the crew, is right after you'd mentioned the subway scene. Of course, up until that point, you do feel very sympathetic for Arthur Fleck's character, and then you finally see him make that switch. He's just like, you know what, enough is enough.
Right.
I'm going to take matters into my own hands. We should back up a little bit and mention that one of his co-workers, Randall, who's also in the entertainment business, offered him a firearm and said, hey, heard about you getting beat down by those kids, understandably embarrassing, here's some protection, quote unquote. And of course, Arthur's like, I can't have this with our job, our line of work, this is inappropriate, like, no. And he's like, just come on, man, like, just take it,
Right, and I think he was also saying that as in my mental state, and they won't allow me to have a gun, so I think that played a lot into it, and that could be considered one of the politically charged moments within the movie. But
for sure, and from that, he keeps this gun with him, and we get that very weird, again, uncomfortable scene, where he is a clown for hire at a hospital, for a children's hospital, and he's doing the if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands song, and he's going along with it. The kids are into it, and then all of a sudden, this pistol falls right out of his pocket, and onto the floor, and it's like, whew, okay, that's all right. That's a lot to take in. And so, of course, from there, he gets the call from his boss in the telephone booth, and it's like, hey, heard about that incident today. This is the last straw. Like, you probably stole that sign. You've had all of these complaints about you being weird and making people uneasy. Like, look, you've already been on the fence. This is it. You're fired. You're out.
You can't be taking a gun to a job.
You're not good for business anymore. You're a liability. We can't afford to have you. And so from there, that's when he winds up on the subway ride home, and he's down, still, for some odd reason, in his clown getup. Why he wouldn't have changed out of that is beyond me, but all a part of his character. And so, of course, we get this group of guys that's clearly been drinking out on the town. They're just trying to have a good time. They're flirting with this lady, bothering her. She moves and goes into the next part over. And throughout the film, we also get to see him have this uncontrollable laugh, which is creepy in and of itself. And Phoenix did a great job of monitoring and managing that throughout the film, so where it wasn't overdone, I feel like it was brought up in the appropriate moments, and just tied right back into the mythos of Joker. Like, this is who I am. I find comedy in things others maybe won't. And that's just me.
Yeah, I think it was really good how they attributed Joker's laugh to an illness that actually exists in real life. An illness that you laugh uncontrollably when you don't mean to. And so it was cool that they made that connection. So
I thought that was neat how they intertwined that in there, because he, I believe, in an early scene, is on a bus, and a little kid is looking at him, and he's trying to play peekaboo, make him laugh. He's got innocent enough intentions, but understandably the mom notices this and says, hey, quit looking at my kid, and then he starts to uncontrollably laugh, and that's when she's about to put on her mom claws and say, like, hey, what's your problem? And he hands her a card that says right on it, like, I'm sorry, I've got a condition where I laugh uncontrollably. It might make moments inappropriate, or something that you might think is inappropriate. I'm not really trying to be rude. It's just a condition. Please excuse me, more or less. And so this same laugh.
And I'm not gonna lie, that was probably the part where I felt the most sympathy for him before the turn happened. because it just the way Phoenix portrayed it, and he had that odd look on his face when she tells him to leave the kid alone and everything. It just, I felt for him in that moment, and it was an awkward moment.
Right, understandably so. And so, of course, we fast forward to him being on the subway scene, as we've mentioned, and these guys are out just trying to have a good time, trying to flirt with that chick. She removes herself from the situation,
Right.
knowing that they're belligerent. She doesn't want any part of it. And, of course, Arthur Fleck just starts to laugh uncontrollably. And these guys, being drunk, take it as, oh, so you think that's funny that, she left? And, like, we can't get, like, you would have a chance with this chick? And they start to tease him and obviously make fun of his clown appearance. And just like the teens in the back alley, they start to physically go after him and start, beating him up there on the subway cart.
Right.
And at that moment, that's when he finally just snaps. He's had it, pulls himself up, and ends up shooting them all.
Yeah, pulls his gun, and they didn't even realize he had a gun, and he, without hesitation, really just shoots all three of them, and then gets off the boat, or gets off the bus, or the subway, whatever it is, and takes off running because he thinks somebody's going to be after him, which there wasn't anybody, oddly enough. But, I mean, I guess it just happened, so...
I think it was also for us to understand from an audience standpoint that it was kind of late at night.
Right.
So maybe wouldn't have really been much in the way of security or police patrolling per se. But that brought up one of my favorite scenes in the movie, in that from there he goes into a restroom or some sort of pit stop area, and it's just him in this very dingy, grimy, gritty bathroom, looks at himself in the mirror still in full clown outfit, and he starts to do kind of like this, I don't want to say interpretive dance, but more or less has that sway to him right after he had killed them on the subway. And to me, I feel like Todd Phillips did a great job of filming that scene. That's what I was mentioning a little bit earlier as we started this portion of the discussion. It was kind of like his quote-unquote dance with the devil. I think he was starting to really accept, this is who I am. That felt good, felt right.
Yeah, I think it was like a freeing moment. Like, this is who I'm going to be from now on.
Right, like a
there's
weird...
no going back.
Yeah, weird liberation for his character. And so at that point you realize, okay, it's about to get real.
Right.
And so from there we go back to his life in the apartment, and he's still struggling, and he meets some secondary characters such as Zazie Beetz, who plays Sophie Drummond, I believe is her last name in the movie.
Right.
And it's a next door neighbor that's kind of down the hall. She gets on the elevator with her little girl and starts to complain about being a mother, like, oh, it's tough kids, and she gets that little hand signal of the gun, like, like, oh gosh, sometimes they make you want to go crazy. And Arthur picks up on this, and as he's going back to his apartment, he lets her and goes, hey, and does the whole thinking they have a connection in the elevator.
That was really odd.
Definitely a creepy moment, but you get the sense of like, oh, okay, well, is this, an important character, or like were they just showing that to show his craziness? And so she ends up popping up a little bit more and almost becomes sort of somewhat of a love interest, I guess, for Arthur's character. And you see her, supporting him and being with him, and you almost get the sense that maybe like her level of crazy matches his level of crazy in the beginning.
Right.
But of course, that brings us into, I think, probably our favorite parts of the film. And that's when we left, we didn't really know quite how to feel about it, didn't quite have our bearings as to what we had just watched. So we did our research and saw some more theories. And when we really thought about the Joker's character as a whole, it's like, well, you get this sense in the movie after a certain couple of scenes. They go back to some of those scenes, almost kind of rewind.
Right.
And they show that she wasn't by his side, she wasn't really supporting him, she wasn't really even involved at all. It was more of a delusion. It was his imagination running wild and thinking that she was this, girlfriend.
You come to find out that it seems like that moment in the elevator with her kid was probably the only moment that they had
interaction-wise,
where they talked to each other or anything. Obviously she lives in his building, so he sees her every now and then, but they don't have the relationship that is portrayed.
No, and I think that's a testament to Todd Phillips' job as a director, is he really sprinkles in these delusions early on to make you think that they're happening, and that maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel for this guy, even though of course he's done some of the things that he's done, and then it just all comes crumbling back down to this guy is just a loose cannon. You really aren't sure what is up, what is down, what's happened, what hasn't, and that's perfect for the Joker, because if you go back to what we had mentioned in The Killing Joke, that classic iconic line of, if I have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice.
Right.
I feel like that's him going back and literally picking and choosing what he wants to believe actually happened. And I think the best moment that we get in this film that really shows us that is to go back to Thomas Wayne's character, played by Brett Cullen. There's a moment where he ends up, I guess, sneaking his way into a charity ball or some kind of big swanky event where Thomas Wayne is at, because earlier on in the film, his mother, Penny Fleck, keeps mentioning, like, oh, we should be expecting a letter from Thomas Wayne anytime now, or like, you should go talk to Thomas Wayne, he can help us out of this situation, he's such a great guy. Because we find out an interesting kind of twist is that, according to Penny Fleck, who of course we can tell right away is very mentally disturbed and not all the way there, believes or has this, when I talk about delusions, has this delusion that he is the son, Arthur is the son of Thomas Wayne, which brings up a crazy point in that how odd would it be for Batman and the Joker to essentially be brothers?
Yeah, that was a hard thing for me to even accept. She used to work for Thomas Wayne at some point, and so it's weird because she acts like they had a fling at one point, going back to what I was saying about, they portray Thomas Wayne as maybe possibly cheating on his wife at some point, and that's where I was going with that. And like, she even has a picture I guess it's of herself when she was younger, and on the back of it it's signed.
Yeah, it says nice smile, TW.
Or, you have a beautiful smile or something like that, and it's signed TW. And so we don't ever really know. Like, obviously she's not all there either, so it's very likely that she could have signed that on the back of her picture herself, or he could have done that and she just took it as meaning something more than it did. But then we get back to her telling him that, and he goes to this ball thinking that he is his son. And you want to go back to where you were going with that?
And so to pick up where I left off from there, to go back to those delusions and how we get a sense of, maybe he's just been confusing this whole time or making it up as he goes. Mm-hmm. So we get that scene where he meets Thomas Wayne, confronts him in the bathroom and says, hey, this is going to sound really weird, but do you remember Penny Fleck? Like, I'm Arthur, I'm her son, and I'm also your son.
Right.
And so, of course, upon hearing this, Thomas Wayne is like, what? You mean Penny Fleck, like the crazy lady that used to work for me?
Right.
No, like, this is not the case. It's a delusion. You're delusional,
Right, and that's what I'm saying by, like, somebody you think is a good guy and has always been portrayed as a good guy. Like, even when he gets confronted by the Joker telling him this, he's not nice to him, and, like, he even ends up punching him.
Oh, he does.
And I understand his reaction to this lady spreading lies or spreading rumors that they had an affair, but at the same time, he just didn't come off as a good person in that conversation, and that was just really weird to see, because, like I said, the Waynes have always been portrayed as good people and like the saviors of Gotham.
Right.
And so this whole movie is full of irredeemable characters, it seems.
Oh, absolutely. And so from there, after he decks him, of course, his nose is a little messed up and starts to bleed a little bit, and he rests his hands on the sink, and from there we get that flip or that cut scene where it goes from him being in that restroom to being in the restroom, or at least a bath area in his own apartment.
Right.
And so that's where you really start to think, oh, okay, like, have some of these events actually happened?
Yeah, like it's very difficult to determine what's real and what's not.
And again, I think that's a testament to such a great job being done by Todd Phillips, because the brilliance of the Joker, like we talked about in the last episode, is the fact that he is this loose cannon, this wild card. He has pretty much no backstory. I think that was the biggest worry for people going into this film, that was the biggest cry or lash out from DC fans, was the Joker can't have a backstory. He doesn't have an origin. Like, why would you do this? This can't be an origin story. And so
I was one of those people.
Right. Understandably so. But I think, again, Todd Phillips does a really great job of interweaving these delusions in such a way that it is very ambiguous as to whether or not we can accept this as, take it for face value, this is what happened, this is how the Joker came to be. I think it's just another one of his choices of, this is how I'm going to decide to pretend this is my backstory for today.
Right. And so Robert De Niro is also in this movie.
He is.
And we haven't mentioned him yet, but he is apparently a character that is, I guess, kind of like a Johnny Carson type character.
Sort of like a late night talk show host. Yeah.
And so going back a minute, there is one scene where Arthur Fleck, I guess, decides or has always wanted to be a stand-up comedian or something of that nature. And honestly, this is the part that's really the only part that kind of connects to the Killing Joke graphic novel, in my opinion. I mean, the rest of the movie didn't really feel like it had anything to do with that. This is like the only part that is like a inspiration from the original graphic novel. Apparently, Arthur Fleck has always wanted to be a stand-up comedian, and so he decides decides that he's going to do stand-up, and he goes to this nightclub in Gotham and tries to do it, and he can't stop laughing, and so it doesn't go well at all, and he gets, canned and made fun of, so much so that Murray, which is Robert De Niro's character, decides to talk about it on his late night talk show and plays a clip of Arthur doing the stand-up special, or doing his stand-up, and it shows him bombing, and he makes fun of him, which leads into another delusional type scenario.
Right. Well, and that's so even before that, we get the sense that it's a show that he and his mother watch every night, and
Right.
so Murray Franklin is kind of Arthur's hero. It's like, oh yeah, this is somebody that's in entertainment. This is somebody that makes people laugh. This is somebody that I could see myself being like, or someone that I idolize. And so he has
Right.
kind of this daydream in which at first it almost feels like a flashback where he went to a show and got called down by Murray Franklin. But of course
Right.
we realized that never happened. It was just a delusion. So that's why I say it's more of a daydream. But he pretends to stand up in the audience and say, yeah, my name's Arthur and I want to be a comedian. And my mom always said that I had a knack for making people smile and bringing joy to the world.
Right.
And Murray calls him down and tells him in his delusion, his daydream, like, yeah, you're a great guy, Arthur. It sounds like you've got a promising career. The world needs more of you and what you're trying to do. It sounds awesome.
Right.
And that's the end of the
tells
daydream.
him that he's like who he would want his son to be if he had a son. Like this guy that he talked to for 5 seconds. It's funny, but yeah, that it just shows how out there Arthur is.
Right, and so of course from there, later on, he really just dives deeper into becoming this character, the Joker. And so you really just start to see him unravel, both at the office before he gets fired, and then both as he starts to progress through trying to figure out his past, who he is, where, again, like we said, he confronts Thomas Wayne. He goes on to find out that he was actually adopted by Penny Fleck, and so there's another way that the movie kind of makes you feel somewhat sympathetic, but you feel less sympathetic at that point because you realize that he is just somebody that's completely gone off of the rails, and we get these detectives that are hot on his case because of his past with work history being a clown. The news story that comes out, because of course these guys that were murdered on the subway, it's not just swept under the rug, like it becomes a breaking news story, and kind of starts this weird clown revolt movement among the downtrodden and deranged citizens there in Gotham, where they're like, yeah, down with the 1%, and this is a symbol that we can get behind, and like politicians are clowns, and so we're going to wear the the clown costume, and this is going to be our movement. And so from that, the detectives start to do their research and start to connect the dots and realize that if they're going to peg it on somebody, this seems like maybe a potential suspect. So Arthur becomes suspect number one in doing their research. All the while he's trying.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't really recall, I guess it was just because of the video that he talked about on his show of Arthur, but for some reason they call and invite Arthur to come on Murray's show. But,
oh yeah, they call because they realize, hey, this guy's from Gotham, he's local, why don't we go ahead and have him here on the set? How hilarious would that be? And so they think, yeah, we poked fun at him, but maybe if we get him on the show, it'll help for, boost ratings and just kind of we'll continue this gag for a little bit longer. And what they don't realize is just who this person is.
Right.
And they bite off more than they can chew.
Definitely, which also brings us to another scene that was just crazy and out there, but it was honestly probably my favorite scene. So we get that he's being invited to Murray's show, and so he goes home and he's like getting ready for the show and all this, and he even decides that he's going to kill himself on Murray's show, but I don't really recall why did he come to that conclusion.
Well, I don't think it was so much that as it was he was going to get or enact revenge on Murray, because he sees the episode where they play his clip of him bombing, doing stand-up, and he realizes at first, he thinks, oh, like Murray Franklin has recognized my comedic take, he thinks that I'm great, my delusion isn't a delusion, he thinks that I'm a stand-up comedian, and then of course he realizes that the crowd's laughing at him, not with him, and so that's when you see that little twist, gears going on inside Joaquin Phoenix's head.
Yeah, but he does at some point, he decides that he's going to go on the show and kill himself on the show.
Well, I think maybe initially that might have been his thought, but I think he changes his
Well,
mind.
yeah, he definitely changes his mind. We see that, but I know that was originally his plan because he, like, when he's at home, he even, like, pulls out the gun and plays it out, like, how he's going to do it. But anyway, so two guys from the job that he used to have come to see him at his house because they're worried about him, or one of them at least is worried about him, and they want to make sure that he's okay, and because he got fired. And the two people that come to his house is the big guy that gives him the gun.
Yeah, Randall comes to the house and he's like, hey, I gave you that firearm, and they're saying at work that you put it to good use, and you mentioned my name, so I want to know what all you told them.
Yeah, that was why he came. And then the other guy that comes is this, I guess he's a midget. He's a small guy that works at the same place, and he's always been really nice to Arthur and talked to him and didn't treat him differently.
Right, and I think he's there for genuine concern.
Right.
For Arthur.
Right. You come to find that I think it was like portrayed that they were both coming to see if he was okay, but what was the dude's name?
Randall. He's also the same guy that plays Remus in Boardwalk Empire.
Okay, yeah, I can't ever remember his name, but he's there to ask him about the gun and all that because I guess Arthur tells his boss that that's who gave him the gun and everything.
Right, and even there, that could be a small delusion because, of course, we see Randall giving Arthur the gun, but it might also be a case of that was just a thought that Arthur made up. Like, Randall gave me the gun. I never actually had the gun. It's not my fault. He was the one that provided me with the firearm. And so Randall, again, is trying to cover his own bottom by being like, what all did you tell them? Like, almost, he doesn't come out and say, I never gave you a gun. But it could be implied that he's there to be like, what's going on here, man? Like, what story are you telling them?
Right. So they're both at the apartment talking to him, and he's put on half of his paint, but it's only the white part of his face mask. And so he looks incredibly creepy with just a bright white face and nothing else on.
And dyed green hair at this point.
Right, yeah, he dyes his hair. And so they're talking to him, and Randall starts pushing him about the gun and everything. And he just goes off and beats the crap out of Randall and ends up killing him. Meanwhile, the small dude, I don't even remember his name, but he's sitting over in the corner like freaking out, scared out of his mind because he's sitting there killing this guy right in front of him. And so the little guy doesn't know if he's in trouble or if he's going to kill him next or what. But after he kills the guy, he's like sitting on the floor and he's talking to the small guy and he's like, you've always been nice to me. I don't have any beef with you. You're okay to go. And it's just a really odd scene, but he also kind of puts in some comedy in that small portion. And he even tells the small guy, you're okay. Go ahead and go. I'm not going to hurt you. And as the little guy was walking past him to the door, like Joaquin even like reaches for him, like joking with him, like he's going to hurt him. And it's just so messed up.
Oh, it is. And then you notice, of course, before that, Arthur locks the door to make sure that no one can get out or get away. And given the height of this particular small character, he's not able to reach the lock to let himself out. So he comes back and says, hey, Arthur, would you mind getting the door for me?
I can't unlock it. Can you help me? And Arthur's like just sitting there laughing, and he said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I forgot. And he goes and unlocks the door and just lets the guy leave. And presumably the guy goes and tells the police, because from then you see Arthur headed out to go to Murray's show, and the cops show up, or those two detectives.
The detectives are still hot on his trail.
Right.
And that brings me to a scene that I kind of took a little bit of an issue with in the sense of the musical or score choice. So it's a pinnacle moment, and I would say probably some will eventually look back and say an iconic moment of the film, because he's really embraced and become the clown prince of crime, so to speak, at that point.
Right.
He's taken another victim, and he's just a loose cannon clown out on a vengeance mission.
Oh, yeah.
So he's dancing crazily down these concrete steps, and for some reason the director chose to use Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter, one that starts out with the hey, and then you get that iconic guitar, and it's like when you hear that, to me, I always think more like a sports movie, or fans in the stands, or like players getting ready to come out on the field, something like that, not the Joker.
Right.
So I was a little, like, at first I was like, okay, if they're gonna run with this song all the way down the steps, I'm gonna have a problem with that. So towards it's about a 2-minute scene. So the first minute, is that Rock and Roll Part 2 by Gary Glitter, which has its own controversy in and of itself.
Right.
Then the last minute of it is kind of this swooning undertone violin, like kind of creepy undertone music, and that to me made more sense. I was like once that came in, I was like, okay, that's more appropriate. They're showing that he's really gone off the deep end at this point and become the Joker. I would have rather seen them run with that score going down the steps the whole way.
The only thing I can come up with is they were playing that song. Like you said, it's a real upbeat song and normally used for more sports and stuff like that. But I guess it was probably that was his moment. Like he's become free of his mental illness and like not that he doesn't have it anymore, but that he's accepted who he is and is probably happier than he's ever been.
Right. I could see that.
And like he struts down the steps and like all happy and like excited almost. It's really weird, and it's still a really weird song choice, but I would say that's the only thing I can come up with is what he was trying to portray there.
I can see that because he does seem very visibly liberated, like this is who I've always been.
Right.
You know, it's time to just go be myself and go to the Murray Franklin show and just keep this crazy snowball rolling.
Right.
And that's exactly what he does, because then we go from there to him being on the show. He's backstage getting ready. He's already painted, I assume he's painted, or maybe taken some kind of red marker or something on the mirror there, and it says put on a happy face, that iconic line. And so as they're talking it over, things are starting to really boil over in the streets. The rioters are starting to become more aggressive.
Right.
The streets of Gotham seem to be on a tipping point. You know, shops are starting to be robbed, and it's really just out of control. And so the director of the show is like, look the way he's dressed. We can't send him out here on the show. It's going to cause even more of an uproar. Like, we've got to cut this. We can't do the interview. And of course, Murray Franklin's like, no, we'll play it up. You know, we'll make this work. And you're not making a political statement, right?
Right.
And Arthur's like, no, of course not. I'm just a fan of the show. You know, happy to be here. Oh, and one more thing. You know, when I get introduced, can you introduce me as Joker?
Right.
And of course, that's because before, when he was making fun of him in that clip on the show, he had said like, oh, check out this Joker. You know, look at this scene. This local from Gotham who thinks he's a stand-up comedian.
Right.
So he plays to that, and they introduce him on the show. And from there, it's just this very tense, awkward back and forth between Murray and between Arthur.
Right. And it's odd because Arthur, like, while he's on the show, he even confesses that he killed the guys on the train. And then from that point on, you can tell that Murray's like, he does a good job of not acting freaked out. But, I mean, like, I don't know if the only thing I can come up with is that he was doing that to try and, like, keep him talking and keep it going so that it would give enough time for the cops to get there, I guess. That's the only thing I can come up with. Because Murray just continues with it, and they're like, once he confesses to the murder, they're like all ready to cut the show, and they're trying to say, you know, we gotta go, we need to end this. And Murray's like, no, let me continue, and he's talking to him and trying to do the interview. And then Arthur goes into a big like speech about mental illness and how he's been treated and all this kind of stuff, and then
right, nobody notices him. They walk over him on the street. You know, no one's paying him any attention. But now, you know, him doing the acts that he's done and doing the things that he's set forth and displaying the behavior and everything, it's a situation where he's trying to convince them that what he's doing is right and what they're doing is wrong. And it boils up to a point to where he doesn't want to listen to what Murray has to say any longer. And then, which you pretty well know this is coming for the most part based on other scenes that we saw in the movie before, where he shoots the wall, or he's like, you know, hey Murray, and he's got the gun and he's practicing. Of course, initially it was on himself, but obviously he switches gears and realizes, no, why take my own life? I'm going to take out other people that don't understand the way I am.
Right.
And that's exactly what he does.
Yeah.
He unloads right there.
Yeah,
Murray.
It was probably the biggest, I guess, surprise to me of the movie. I mean, because and they don't try and glaze over it or cut from it or anything. They straight up, he pulls the gun and shoots Murray right in the head, and they show everything. And I mean, it was just a shocking moment in the show.
Oh, it took me. In the movie, it took me, you know, for sure. Because I just again, it's one of those where I was like, my heart was racing. I was like, okay, yeah, it's probably coming. It's coming. Mm-hmm. Here it comes. And then when it happened, I was just like, oh my gosh, like yeah, okay, that just went down. And of course, they obviously are able to restrain him, throw him into the back of a cop car. But again, at this point, everything is starting to go severely downhill. The rioting in the streets has already boiled over to a point to where they are just running amok of cop cars, businesses, buildings, and you know they've got all sorts of different weapons weapons and flames or fires trying to be put out everywhere, and it's just a hot mess downtown in Gotham, to the point that eventually I think an ambulance actually wipes out the cop car that Arthur is in, and these rioters, they start to realize, oh, this is the guy we literally just saw live on Murray Franklin. This is our guy.
Right.
This is our leader. Let's help him. Let's get him out of the cop car.
Yeah, I want to say that it may have been one of the, like, some of the Joker type guys that did it, or that, like, I guess they might have stolen an ambulance, but
it looked like they were. Yeah, they were clearly. It was not somebody that should have been driving the ambulance. We'll say that.
Right. But I know that they rammed into the cop car to stop them because they knew that Joker was in there and they knew who he was and everything. So, and then from there, just the rioters go crazy and it just is all out a big mess, and there's fire everywhere and
just complete chaos.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they start trashing stuff, and then you see to the side, you see Bruce Wayne and his parent coming out of a theater, and they walk into a alleyway, and it's not Arthur Fleck that does it, but I guess one of the other people that's dressed up like a clown goes down, and you see that iconic scene, and so that's pretty much it. From there, they go to him in a mental institution,
which we assume is Arkham Asylum.
Right, at the end, and he's talking to his doctor, and he starts laughing, and she's like, what are you laughing about? And it's kind of like he's picturing, right when he's laughing, he's picturing the Waynes getting shot down, and that's when she says, what are you laughing at? And he says, you wouldn't understand. And then it kind of, that's the end of it, but a few seconds later, you see him walking down the hall in this asylum, and he's like leaving a blood trail from his feet, which was kind of weird to me.
A little bit.
Because he would have had to do some pretty messed up stuff to get that much blood on it, but I guess it's hinting at or saying that he killed the doctor that he was with.
And that's the way that I took it.
Right, and I mean, I think that was the way they want you to take it, and then all of a sudden you see him running through the halls and people in the asylum chasing after him, and then the screen goes black and we get credit.
Right,
so.
But before that, when he's having, way earlier on in the film, he's having these sessions with his therapist, and she mentions, you were in the asylum before, like, let's try to avoid you going back there. And so, again, we all have to think about this in a sense of, was the entire film a delusion? You and I did some research to try and help make sense of what we had just seen after watching the movie, and a lot of the rolling or consistent themes and theories that we've seen so far in our research, which it really made sense and would just be another credit to Todd Phillips being a great director, is the sense that maybe the whole thing was a delusion, and this has just been him in Arkham this whole time, and the movie that we saw was just his thought process and his memory or fabricated thought process of just another choice for him to have as a backstory.
Right. And there's more to the movie, and we did skip over some stuff and missed some moments in the movie, but I think we were just talking about the highlight that kind of hit us and what we noticed about the movie. So we do definitely recommend you see the movie, and because there's a lot of stuff to notice and talk about, but it would take forever to talk about. So
and you definitely, this is a movie that you'll want to see more than once, and not only because it's a good watchable film, but because, like you just said, there's a lot of moving parts and things that I know I missed first time through that I want to pay more attention to a second or third viewing to try and get more of a, kind of wrap my mind around what all was trying to be intended or implemented.
Right. And it definitely leaves you, like, I like that there's conspiracies or different theories that have come out of it saying, was this real or was that real or what? You just don't really know what's real and what's not, and I like that part of it.
Yeah, I think that was a great way to go about it. And overall, one thing that I plucked out from this film is something that I would love to see done in a one-off graphic novel, and that's the fleeting idea that Batman and the Joker could be brothers. Like, I would love to see that played out panel to panel in just a quick, one-off, like I said, graphic novel run. I think just the concept is really neat. Play around with a lot, and I think it would just be very interesting to see that done by somebody if they chose to pick it up.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be interesting to see, like, in a one-off novel or graphic novel. I'm glad they didn't do it in the movie. I think they would have gotten a lot of hate for that.
I think they would have lost a lot of views.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of backlash.
But other than that, I would say it's definitely watchable and very good movie that makes you really think about it and continue to think about it.
For sure, and it's one that we recommend to really get the full depth and appreciation of what Todd Phillips and the crew were trying to go for and convey. And so, Charlie, I think we're at the point to wrap up here. We've got it in true Nerdy by Nature fashion. We need to rank Joker, the film, as a whole. So I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
And I think for me, again, highly watchable. Phoenix absolutely delivers, knocked it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the supporting characters, Robert De Niro, Zazie Beetz, and so on and so forth, did a great job.
Right.
Overall, it's a well-rounded film. Although I think there were some choices that maybe could have been made a little bit differently. And I also have to say the fact you could cut out a handful of scenes and this ultimately just be kind of a thriller drama type movie. Part of me wanted to give it 4 nerds, but I just couldn't quite get myself there.
Agreed.
So I'm going to go with 3.5 and dock it a half a star only because I knew going into it that it wouldn't be comic book canon.
Right.
And it by itself could be a very good film. But I think overall, for them trying to make it something that they initially set out not to be, that was just, a little bit much to take, I guess, for me.
Definitely.
As a comic book fan. So, but still, great film overall, and I can understand some of the criticism and some of the controversy. So with that, I think for me, for my fair, true nerdy by nature rating, I have to go with that 3.5 stars. How about you?
Yeah, and I would say the same, and I would go 3.5 as well, just about everything you said, but just the fact that, it's just me, but the pure fact that there was just no silver lining or positive spirit in it at all, I would say 3 out of 5. Now, seeing it again or seeing it multiple times, that might change, but right now it was just really, really depressing. And honestly, when I go to a movie, it's great to see great actors doing what they do best, but at the same time, when I go to a movie, I want to enjoy myself, and you know what I mean? I'm not saying that I didn't
There's certainly a
enjoy
level of, I don't want to say escapism, but you go to the movies for the most part to forget about, some of the things that are going on, especially nowadays in the social and political climate that we have.
Right.
I don't want to use the word toxic, but things could definitely be better, we'll say that. And so you go to the films, or you listen to an album from your favorite artist, in your personal time, or you choose to spend money for entertainment. You want to be entertained, not emotionally exhausted, so to speak.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with 3 out of 5 until further notice.
Okay, maybe we'll come back to that, revisit the ranking that we give it here.
Exactly.
In this episode. But that's really going to wrap things up for this Joker review. We hope you enjoyed it. And of course, be sure to share this with everyone that you want. Introduce them to Nerdy by Nature. Be sure to hit that like button. And there's still time for you guys to leave comments. Feel free to let us know what you want to hear. Anything that you disagreed with, or different talking points that you would have liked to have heard, or things that you'd like to bring up to discuss with us. Feel free to visit our Facebook page, Nerdy by Nature. Absolutely like that. Share it with as many people as possible. And stay tuned for our next episode. So, of course, the show Watchmen is going to premiere on HBO starting October 20th. And before that, sort of in the same fashion where before the Joker film came out, we went over The Killing Joke. Just went hand in hand. It kind of made sense. We're going to follow that same process with Watchmen coming out on HBO. Before the show premieres, we're going to go ahead for our next episode and do a review of the Watchmen graphic novel done by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. It's an iconic classic.
Yep.
You want to talk about spoiler alert, no surprise, we're going to give that one pretty high marks on the Nerdy by Nature scale. It's just a classic graphic novel that really allows you to have a thought-provoking experience. You see this 1980s world from multiple different vantage points, from multiple different characters, and Alan Moore really allows you to kind of make up your own mind as a reader as to which one you most resonate with or agree with. So be sure and be on the lookout for that next episode. And signing off, I'm Agent Smith.
And I'm Captain Rogers. God bless.